Hello, I'm Bill Monroe, and welcome to episode 62 of 2-Minute Talk Tips. This week's tip: tell a story to give value to a product. This week's tip actually comes to us from special guest Iszi Lawrence.
It's a really bizarre thing in our lives where people absolutely hate being sold to, but absolutely love shopping. They love to buy new things, and they love to get excited about something, but they hate being sold to. So it is about telling somebody honestly about something and letting them, respond and reading what they're saying, not going in with your patter and going, and this and this and this and this, if you can sense that they're not interested in that. Letting them walk away and saying, okay, and then letting them come back. It's, I think it does depend obviously on the product that you are, marketing and everything else. But if your product and your brand is based around you, and it could be that, you make jewelry, but you can tell stories about that jewelry. You can make that your jewelry special. Just because you're a product-based business, not a service-based business, does not mean that it isn't about you. Because I will happily spend more money of somebody who makes their own jewellery beautiful than I would, there's a story behind it and I feel emotionally connected to that person as well as what they're selling, than I will to go to a jeweler's on the high street and get sold a standard necklace and think, oh, that's quite nice. I can see my, mother or my sister wearing that, and I'll buy that for them, rather than I'm going to make them something bespoke that they're going to treasure, and I'm going to, they're going to remember me, if I move away or whatever, it becomes in itself its own event, and it becomes much more precious. And that extra value is translated into, a more expensive object, but I'm much more happier spending the extra money.
Stick around, and after the break, we'll talk more with Iszi. Welcome back. This episode is actually going to be a little bit longer than most of the episodes I put out there, but that's because Iszi shares a ton of great insights in it. Iszi Lawrence is a British comedian, podcaster, presenter, radio personality, and public speaking coach. She has more than a decade of experience talking in places ranging from nightclubs to boardrooms to the Oxford Union to the Tedx stage in Southampton. You can learn a lot more about Iszi by visiting Iszi.com. I had a lot of fun talking with Iszi about a wide range of topics, including how comedy prepares you for a career as a speaker, how to bypass underage drinking laws in the UK, the differences between female and male speaking students, the importance of acknowledging awkwardness when you encounter it, and really just a ton more. So, let's get to it. Well, Iszi, thank you for joining me today on 2-Minute Talk Tips.
Thank you very much for having me.
So now your background is you are currently, you do a lot of coaching for public speaking and host a couple of podcasts, but your background is in comedy.
I still do a lot of stand-up comedy. It's partly how I earn a bit of extra pocket money. So it is what I would say semi-professional, if not professional hobby. It earns me enough that if the public speaker training dropped, I'd still be able to keep my cats alive doing stand-up comedy. But I'm not a big household name here in the UK. I am a smaller person who's on the radio a bit and does a lot of live work.
And ultimately, taking care of the cats, that's always got to be the number one priority, or they won't let you live there.
Well, exactly. You feel like, you're sort of cheating as a grown-up, the fact that you're able to spend your daytimes meeting interesting people and getting them to overcome their fears, and then the evenings you can go out and make other people very happy. It's a good old life.
So how did you get into professional comedy or semi-professional comedy or cat subsidizing comedy?
Well, I think it's a classic story of my parents never gave me enough attention, and therefore I sought it from strangers in pubs. But yeah, I just enjoyed going along. One of the main reasons that I enjoy stand-up comedy is that they don't ID you. So in the UK, we have strict drinking laws, as you do in America, but you are allowed to drink from the age of 18. Or if you go to a stand-up comedy night, they never bother to ID you or check to see how old you are. So at the age of 15, I was going in, having a pint of beer and watching stand-up comedy, which is not what I'd recommend, kids. Obviously, that is a bad thing to do, but it is what I did. So I if I wanted a drink, I had to listen to a comedian, and in the end, I enjoyed the comedy a bit more than the alcohol.
So essentially, it sounds like comedy itself became the gateway drug to beer.
Yes, indeed. That is partly it. It's a dangerous thing, guys. Don't drink and laugh. No, do it. It's so much easier. Already we have a little top tip. Get your audience drunk. It's very easy. Not too drunk though, then it becomes very hard. But a little bit drunk, everybody wants to listen to you. It's good.
With all of that experience in comedy and talk, how did you add a speaking coach and event facilitator roles to your career? Why did you choose to go down that path?
Well, it's not so much choosing, it's more, falling down it, because I'm very involved, so I'll step back a little bit so you understand more. So my background is, I started on the comedy circuit, and the comedy circuit in the UK is very similar to the comedy circuit in America, but a bit more cash as far as I can work out. Yeah. So I traveled throughout the UK and into Europe, and I do, gigs, which are usually, between 20 and 45 minutes. I will get up on stage in front of a room full of either drunk idiots, football hooligan types, if you can imagine that, rugby players, that sort of thing, or, hen nights, which you don't call hen nights, you call bachelorette parties, stag do's, which you don't call stag do's, you call bachelor parties or whatever it is. But, the point is, a lot of, I've done weddings, I've done birthdays, I have actually done wakes, not funerals, but wakes, which is weird. But yes, so I've done theatres as well, so I've done shows in the West End and that sort of thing in very formal, and you get a real mix of people. So I've, done gigs at Eton School, which is very posh. I've done gigs at the Oxford Union, which is very well to do, and you have to wear a proper evening attire and give a proper speech. And so I've done gigs like that, and I've done gigs, in Birmingham, a room above a pub, and I've done gigs in Glasgow where they've threatened to bottle me. This is what I have done. So there's a huge mix of audiences. I've done gigs where I'm the only white person in the room. I've done gigs where they've never even heard of other races coming here. You learn to be very adaptable. And one of the things I found that I really enjoyed doing was the more university crowds. It was the more, people, I'd warm up for people who were doing their book tour. And I'd get booked by little festivals in Hay-on-Wye, or I'd do other little things. And so I started getting quite interested in topics like science. So I'd gig with people. You might have heard, let me think, of Brian Cox. He works with a comedian called Robin Ince a lot, and I started to support Robin Ince a little bit. And I've started to work with people who were more into the more educational side of comedy. And from that, I started a podcast, called the Z-List Dead List, which is about obscure people from history, or the Z-List Dead List, if you must. But Z-List Dead List works in an English accent. And this became quite popular, and from that I got to I host a regular gig, a comedy night, although it's very educational, at the British Museum. So the British Museum in London has 350-seater theatre as part of it, and 4 times a year I will get up there and I will do a little comedy show. So that is a very different environment to room above a pub with a load of drunk women on, the night before their wedding. So I've sort of been drawn more that way, and part of getting drawn more that way, obviously academic people in there sort of say, well, this is really interesting. How can we have more public engagement in our research? And there are a few different institutions which do this. The main one being Steve Cross through Bright Club, which is where academics champion their research to a general public audience. And part of that involves training. So I actually got into public speaker training through training academics to speak more comedically about their research, which often isn't very funny. But they make it funny, and I teach them how to do that. So from there, I got a bit of interest, and then I started doing training of, anybody from entrepreneurs to sort of teachers to actual school kids as well. So I do quite a lot.
That's awesome. So that is really interesting when you're talking about all of these events where it sounds like there's a lot of interest in connecting academics with the general public and giving them a broader opportunity to speak. Is that sort of a common venue for folks to attend?
It is and it isn't. So there are nights there. In the UK, we've got nights called the Bright Club, which happen as part of, the university usually funds these. And it's a way of getting public engagement because they've got remits to fill to, justify their government, money coming in to prove that they are educating and also interesting the public in their research, because it's actually very important that, if you're working out, for example, what causes dementia, actually educating the public about what causes dementia, and Alzheimer's disease is quite an interesting and important thing. And the public are interested. Universities, like everybody else, are very interested in creating their own content. And part of that means they've got all of these brilliant academics, all of whom are quite gifted at speaking already and only need a few tweaks to make them funny and engaging. And it turns out that they love doing it too. So I'd say it's quite popular. We also have a lot of festivals like the British Science Festival I've been involved with, and I think there's Green Week and all of these other awareness-raising festivals, which are trying to raise awareness about their subjects. So, for example, my friend Simon Watt has a touring show called the Ugly Animal Preservation Society, where he sort of champions environmentalism, but he does it by going, forget pandas. Pandas get all the money because they're cute, right? What about the slime fish or, all of these other creatures which are hideous and therefore not very photogenic, and nobody wants to give them any money, even though they're very vital to the environment. So he's got a whole show which I go and do every now and again as well. So there are, anybody who is desperate for their charity or desperate for their institution or their cause to, get more attention, it looks to put on live events. And if you look to put on live events, you're looking for speakers. And ideally, you're looking for speakers not only who can give gravitas, but also can be very light. I've had to follow some really serious, I was at the Comedy Store in London and I was opening the charity night. This is on a Monday evening. And the speaker before me was Ben Kingsley, Sir Ben Kingsley,
wow.
The actor. Yeah. So he went on, spoke, Ben Kingsley overran, which was just annoying. He was meant to do about 10 minutes on the charity. He did 20 minutes on the charity. So the comedy was already getting crunched and crunched and crunched.
And nobody's about to give him the hook.
No, nobody's going to go, so Ben Kingsley, shut up, right? Shut up about all of these poor children and their terrible diseases. You be quiet now. Everybody's, he can capture an audience. He's just amazing. So that's why and he's very passionate. And so it was really good. But of course, the MC, the sort of host of the comedy night, had all of their time taken away. So, Izzy, all I can do is go on there and say, we're going to have comedy now, Iszi Lawrence. So I walk on stage, effectively, I have to follow Gandhi talking about dying children. Okay. This is not an easy gig. Just phrase it in the context that you're in. So you just sort of say, let's do this for this charity. Let's make this the funnest night we can possibly make it and raise as much money as possible. And people really get behind that. It's often very difficult because I'm not famous myself. I've got a bit of a following, but I'm not like a big TV name.
You're famous enough to have Sir Ben Kingsley open for you.
Well, exactly. That's the sort of thing I'm doing. So, a few of if you're into British comedy, you might have seen QI and you might have heard of Alan Davies, or you might enjoy, there's very alternative comedy here like Stuart Lee, and there are people like Sarah Millican, all of whom I've had to support when they go on tour. So you've got a room full of their fans, all of whom are really excited about seeing like Alan Davies from the television, and oh my goodness, he's been famous in the UK for like 25 years, and they're really excited. And then I walk on stage, and you can just see their disappointment. And the only thing you can do in that situation is just to be honest and just go, I know, I don't want to see me either, but I'm on here for 20 minutes, so we can either make this fun. I just want to see Alan. This is why I'm doing this gig, is I just want to see his show. And then immediately they sort of understand, and they sort of, it's about, being in the situation you're in and not trying to pretend it's anything that it isn't. I think that's important when you're doing public speaking.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, that's great. It's all about how being aware of the context and what the audience wants, and making those adjustments on the fly, and that becomes really important.
Yeah, it's vital. It's what it is. I mean, I often, because I teach two levels of people. I teach the people who are terrified to be on stage. So I teach the people who've hardly done any public speaking before. They don't want to step on stage. They're holding their notes like they're the most precious things in the world. Like if they let go of them, the floor will drop. Okay. And they're shaking. And basically the achievement for them is to get through it without fainting. And, and so I have little cheats and to make them appear natural, and I do things which make them so you would never know that they were nervous, and they just look confident, and they just can speak it through their thing, and they can click through their slides, and they're done, and that's it, and they walk off, and they're elated, excited, they look professional, they get asked to do more stuff, brilliant. But then I also get people who are already professional speakers who can do all that, and my main advice to them is, don't do any of those tricks. You are at the stage now, because ultimately there's a stage you have to learn all the tricks, and you have to learn all the, it's like acrobatics, learning every little thing that you can do to manipulate the situation that you're in. And then you've got to get to the stage where you've got to drop all that and just talk to the people in front of you. And people freak out when you tell them to do that. They really freak out. But that is the way you get those connections. And it's ultimately the way that if you're trying to find clients in a room full of clients, you're going to probably not appeal to 50% of the audience, but my goodness, to those 20% of the audience that you want to connect with, they will really connect with you because it's you. And if your brand and if you're, if the thing you're selling is around you, so obviously, if you're a comedian, it's all about you. If you're, if you're doing coaching or anything like that, and you want to, get more clients and you've been invited to speak, it is about you, and they've got to connect with you and feel confident in you. And the way you do that is you have to be yourself, and you have to be vulnerable. And people don't like being vulnerable in front of a room full of people. It is scary, but I promise you that is the way forward.
Mm-hmm. It's a lot about establishing that trust. And one of the core things in sales, of course, is that people don't buy because they need something. They buy because they want it. Any of the features, the logical justifications that they can come up with, that's just justification for what they want to do. You have to convince them that they want to engage with you further.
Exactly. And I just think there's this huge trend now for sort of living minimally, but it doesn't mean getting rid of all your stuff. It just means only keeping the stuff that you find connection with. And so I've been trying to, go through all my old junk and throw things away. And it's amazing what I'm ending up keeping. And it's not always the most, the most beautiful, expensive, brand items. It is the items that somebody's given me where I've gone, I remember this happening. I remember the story behind it, or I know who made it, or, it's about that. And then when I'm going and I'm buying things, I'm actually looking for the thing that I want in my home, and I'm putting more value in, how connected I can be to that object, or how connected I can be to the, the book or whatever, that I'm going to end up, using. So it's an interesting way. And I think if you are, setting up a business, and if you are an entrepreneur and you want to connect with people and you want clients, the more that you can put yourself into it, the more you can say, hey, here, make it a connection with the person that you're talking to. Even if it is, you're thinking, well, I'm not talking to one person, I'm talking to 200 people at once. Well, yeah, but you will be talking to that one person if you're doing it right. And that one person is your client, and that one person will keep coming back to you as well.
It's one of the things, interestingly, speaking and public speaking is a lot about listening and really paying attention to what's going on around you.
And it's much easier for a stand-up comedian in that sense, because we know if it's not going well, because we get instant reaction. So I'm used to going, I wait, And for the laugh, and if the laugh doesn't come, it hurts. But you can tell if you're not being funny and just telling your story on a stage, you're doing a talk, or you're explaining your latest product, when people are interested and when they're not interested. You've got that, the little tells, they're leaning forward, they're very quiet. You don't see any of the worst thing is in an audience, you just see the glows of mobile phones on people's faces. It's like they're haunted. It's like that one's dead, that one's dead, that one's dead. It's like their spirits leaving the room. They're not paying attention, and you're just like, and it is the thing that I tell my new nervous clients that relaxes them. And it is the thing that I tell my professional clients which horrifies them. And the truth is, no one cares. So if you're a nervous speaker and you muck up, really nobody cares. I've done amazing, gigs. I've done terrible work, and the promoters had me back the next week because they don't care. They're like, you did all right job, whatevs. Come back next week, do it again. I've had gigs where I have blown the doors off the place. I have, in the American parlance, I have killed the room. They're all wonderfully, they've giggled, they've clapped, they've laughed, and they're all gasping for breath at the end. And then I'll go into the women's toilets and I'll be in a cubicle and I'll hear a conversation. This is during the break of two women coming in and go, "Oh my God, wasn't that last act brilliant? Yeah. What was her name? I don't know. Debbie or something." And I'm like, "No, it's Izzy. No." And it's amazing how people forget. They just have no interest, unless you're, this is one of the things people say, I want all my friends to be there because then I'll feel safe. It's all my friends. Yeah, but your friends know you, so they'll be feeling nervous for you. Strangers don't care. And this is the terrible thing. If you're a professional and you are trying to get new clients and you are speaking on a stage, getting the audience to care is quite difficult. And that is why I think one of the biggest tricks is just being vulnerable. So the big scary news is, it's not scary. It's very relieving because nobody cares, but it's also terrifying because nobody cares. You have to really go for it. You have to say, this is me. If you like it, brilliant. If you don't like it, that's fine. I've wasted your time, but at least it's only a small amount of time you're wasting, and at least I can acknowledge that rather than, "Hey guys," and bashing through as if nothing's going wrong, because that is possibly the most fake thing you can do on occasion. It would be what I would recommend to a new person, though. Always carry on and, the show must go on. But if you are a professional, if you're used to speaking, just break it down and just go, well, this isn't working. Why is that? Does anybody have a question? Does anybody want to ask me anything? Because obviously you're not interested. The only reason you should never do that as well is if you're paranoid. Because if you're one of these people who are paranoid and not very good at reading people, you could be doing really well and then you go, "You all hate me. Why is that?" Don't do that. But it's very difficult when you're doing a podcast to tailor advice to somebody when you don't know what they're like. But the key thing is to just acknowledge that you will fail and to just go, actually, that's all right. I have failed and I'm still alive. And it's a brilliant way of learning, is failing a lot.
And so let's talk about PowerPoint.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on PowerPoint and Keynote and other presentation software solutions?
I would say, if at all possible. Now, for a lot of things, this isn't possible. If you are having to do a safety demonstration, health and safety, or you have to do, you're speaking to experts, and it's very important you get all the information across. Obviously, you need a very detailed and structured PowerPoint with all the notes. If you're doing a lecture for students, you're going to need all of the key things up there with all the book titles and the numbers and everything else. However, for everybody else, if you're speaking to people who are outside your industry, who are not expert in what you're talking about or what you're doing, for goodness sake, please stop using these things called words. If you cannot write, the only words that should ever really be up there are your social media and your website, ideally, because if they're reading, they're not listening to you. I mean, if you pick up a book now and just listen to me prattle on right now, you won't probably notice that I said the word horseradish. And why would have I said the word horseradish? It's a very silly thing for you to notice. And if you stop reading now. The word was horseradish. You won't notice the things that come up because you're distracted. You're reading the person speaking. You're not looking at the speaker. You're reading. Also, please stop reading off PowerPoint and stop reading off Keynote. It is the worst thing. Yeah, I know I can read that. Stop saying what I've already read. It's bizarre. But also, I would say, just because it will give you so much confidence and it will relax you a lot. Imagine that there's a disaster and, the projector stops working. Can you still do your talk? If you can still do your talk, it is a very good talk. If you can't still do your talk, you might want to rethink how you're using PowerPoint. I'm not saying don't use PowerPoint. I think a really useful image and picture of what you're talking about helps, but be prepared for that to go wrong. And then you are pretty much grounded. You can paint a lot of pictures with words. You can say what you mean and get it across. Because ultimately, the human brain is designed to listen to voices and designed to understand stories. That is basically why we have such a large brain. I don't know if you know about Dunbar's number, but Dunbar's number is why humans have a big brain is because, and apes have smaller brains is purely down to our social group size. And our social group size, if you're a macaque, is about, 40 members in your troop. If you're a gorilla, it gets up to sort of 40 to, 50 to 60 maybe if you're a chimp, right? But if you're a human, if you plot our brain size and do it on a graph, our, troop size is usually about 150. That's the amount of different relationships you can keep in your head at once. That's the postman, that's my mum, that's my son, that's my friend Lucy. Those are all that's David. I hate David. That's all you can cope with. And the trouble is, we've evolved and a macaque will bond with its group by grooming. It will literally sit down and it will spend about 14% of its entire day picking fleas and going through each other's fur. And that's how it bonds with the group, says, we are friends. This is what we do. We groom each other. Now, I'm not saying humans shouldn't groom each other. I think it's a fun thing to do, but it takes up a lot of time. If we were to do that to 150 people in a day, the same way a macaque does, it would take us about 45% of our entire day.
And you'd probably get kicked off the bus.
Exactly. So, good joke. So, it is a matter of how do we groom that many people at once? Why? We speak to them. We use this thing called, our frontal cortex to actually formulate words and put them in some sort of structure and then speak to everybody. And we do it in song, we do it in speech, we do it by making objects which communicate thoughts as well. But the point is, humans are primed to listen to a face that is talking, because that is what our entire frontal cortex was built for. It wasn't built for technology or furthering thing. Fire, for example. Why did we invent fire? Fire was invented by our ancestors. We got evidence for it 800,000 years ago, something like that. We didn't start using it for cooking until about 20,000 years ago. So for 780,000 years, roughly that sort of amount of time, fire's primary use was for staying up late at night to chat. That's what it was used for. It's for making the day longer so we have more time to form bonds and talk to each other. So imagine that. Your entire purpose, the entire reason you have this big brain is to listen to other people and form bonds with them. Therefore, anybody who's capable of speaking out of their face at a lot of other faces is a very significant human being with a very, very good skill. We always complain that people don't have attention spans and they can possibly listen to somebody for an hour. I've listened to people for 2 hours without a break and I've laughed throughout. And I've been fascinated, and I can only see half their face because they're looking the other way at the other part of the audience. And I've been completely absorbed and engaged. You have to have the confidence in and of yourself that you are you are enough with who you are. You don't need to justify yourself. You don't need this, amazing, status that to already have achieved in order to be interesting. Neither do you need a tragic story. Neither do you need anything. You are enough as you are, and you have interesting thoughts, and you've got to get those out, and you've got to tell people about them, and you've got to do it with a passion. So you've got to find, there's no good trying to connect with people and talking about something you can't stand, because it's going to come across. You have to find the things that you are passionate about. And, and obviously my passion, as you can tell, you can see that it comes through, like, I'm really into history. So part of the reason I'm really into history, and I really like, the whole sort of human evolution, the science behind that and the evidence behind that and how it's being pieced together and everything else. I find that interesting. And I learn how to get that passion into my other interests as well. For example, teaching public speaking and going, it's all right, guys. There isn't a huge big pressure on us. We're just people. We're just here. All you're doing is talking to other humans, which is your way of saying hello. You're a macaque, and all you're doing is picking up a few fleas. And fleas are tasty.
And good in protein.
Indeed.
So as you're working with a lot of your students, and I try and help out a lot of folks as speakers, but there are some things that I just can't be aware of because it's just not my experience. And I'm wondering what challenges you specifically see some female speakers facing, and how do you help your clients address that?
There's two different things. I think, first off, I do think that there is a general sexism in that you just go, even I do. I'll get on a plane and there'll be a lady pilot on the plane. I'll go, oh, that's unexpected. How do I feel about this? Now, I'm not thinking, oh, well, we're all doomed. We're all going to drop out the sky. But when a man gets on the thing and goes, I'm your pilot today, I don't think about it at all. So when a woman gets on stage, a lot of audience members go, oh, a woman. I wasn't expecting a woman. How do I think about it? And all they're doing is they're questioning you very slightly. They're not saying, oh, she's a woman. She's going to be terrible. I could never listen to a woman. They're not doing that at all. They're just going, I didn't expect this. Will she know anything? I don't. So there's this questioning. And I think what I teach, women to do particularly is to open with a very, very strong line. So they need to open with their most interesting point, and it will annoyingly get lost a bit because it is your opening bit and the audience is getting used to you. But I tend to break down speeches and talks into chunks. So for a man, I will say open with your interesting or second most interesting chunk and end with your most interesting. For a woman, I tend to say open with your most interesting, repeat it again just before your end, and end with your second most interesting, because that is a way of grabbing the audience's attention and relaxing them and letting them know that you're comfortable and you know what you're doing. So there is an element of sexism there, which is just part of the culture, whatever. But what I notice in my students more than anything is that men are very good at just going, oh, I'll give it a go. I'll just give it a go. Be fine. If I fail, I fail. It doesn't matter. I've tried it. I've done it. Let's go. And they don't take failure to heart as much, whereas women just go, what do you mean I can't control the situation? If I learn every word backwards and forwards and I learn every little bit, what do you mean it might still go wrong? I don't understand. What do you mean I can't control everything? I cannot fail. If I fail, everything is ruined. I'll have to think about my failure. I can't fail. And there's this terrible fear of failure among the female sex, which is pronounced. I'm not sure. It might just be a UK thing, but I don't think it is. I think that women fear failure more than anything. I've had a few, I've worked with a few academics who were sort of talking about the fact that, they find there's an economics professor, and she says she gets female students starting, and all the female students who get A's in their first term will carry on with the course. But and so will the men. All the women who get B's or C's and lower grades, so they won't continue with the course and they'll go and do something they're good at. Whereas the men will just go, I'll persist with this a bit longer because I know what I need this course for. I want to work in banking or whatever. So men are much more goal orientated. They seem to go, I can see the end of this. I'm going to do this talk because I want what I imagine it will achieve. Whereas women tend to go, well, I could sort of see it might go somewhere, but actually what the focus of this is the talk, and if that goes wrong, I can't live with myself. And that is a very different way of thinking about it. They both have to do the talk, and they both have to be interested in what they're doing. They both have to face their fears and they both have things to overcome. But for women, they take failure more personally. And I don't know why it is. I think it might have something within the UK in particular. Boys are encouraged to do a lot more sport. So, boys are encouraged to go, I'll go play football, which is soccer, but shut up.
Sure.
Football, proper football, and they will often fail. So they won't make the team, they won't get picked, or when they do get picked for the team will lose. And they get this idea that they're used to failure. Whereas when I first started doing stand-up comedy, I was not used to failing. I would always gear towards a subject I was good at. So I'd always do the subjects I was good at, and I'd avoid all the things that I was bad at. And you can actually get quite far doing that. And then suddenly when you're faced with the prospect of where you might fail, it's much easier not to try. And it's much easier to go, well, actually, I don't need to do that. I could do something that I'm better at. I'm much better at online marketing. I'll just do online marketing. I'll do that sort of thing. Rather than go, okay, I'd actually make more impact if I tried this new skill and got better at it. It might not lead anywhere. It might lead somewhere amazing. But because I don't know the end goal, and because I'm risking, my own sanity, really, because if I fail at something, I don't know how to deal with that failure, I won't try. And so they tend to be, the female speakers I tend to work with tend to want to write their speeches word for word, learn it word for word. They don't want to do things like overrun by a minute, because that would be failing. They don't want to, have audience questions they're not prepared for. They're much less relaxed about the process, and they're trying to control it a lot more. And the men tend not to be like that. It might be bravado, but I think it's also the fact they're a bit more confident in knowing, I've mucked up tons of times before and it's fine. There's this sort of element to them that's a bit more like that. Does that make sense?
Yes, that does make sense. It's a really interesting perspective to think about, and from the bigger picture, looking at the value of failing earlier in life and training you to be more comfortable taking chances later in life.
Yeah, I think failing is it's the best thing you can do, is to fail at stuff and also listen to criticism. So it's very difficult. I mean, this is the thing. As a woman, you put something out on, Facebook or whatever, and it's a bit controversial. You do get quite a lot of nasty comments, but you also get interesting comments, and you get, critical comments where you can think, actually, I could improve on that. They're right. I did waffle in that bit and I could have done that a bit better. They're actually right about that. Interesting. But you do have to, if you're a woman, sift through quite a lot of abuse,
Sure.
to do that, which I don't think men have to do as much. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, because my goodness, it does happen, but there isn't that sort of, level of it. I don't know. I'm also generalizing a lot,
Sure.
There are men who are very fearful, they want to control everything too, and there are women who are much more gung-ho. I'm just talking from my perspective, from the classes I've taught, from the workshops I've taken. Women tend to be more, I cannot fail, otherwise nobody will love me. It's a very weird thing. I think, we have to appear perfect in everything, and it's wrong. You can turn up on stage with like coffee on your shirt and everything will be fine.
Right.
And what people don't realise, particularly women, is nobody likes perfect people. Nobody relates to people who never spill coffee on themselves, or don't stutter occasionally, or read out the wrong, bullet point or whatever. It's fine. People hate people who are perfect. They chastise them all over the internet. They sort of really dislike people who live, these wonderful, idyllic lives, and take enormous glee when they all go wrong and get divorced and everything. So, just know that, be flawed. It makes you human. It makes people like you.
What I think is also interesting, too, when we look at anything like this, and especially when we talk about adult students who are pursuing self-improvement, anytime we're dealing with people who come to us for help or come to take a class, it's a very self-selected group as well that's looking for a way of growing or improving themselves that sort of separates them from the general population.
True, it does. And so already, I mean, that's the thing. Already in the class, you have people who are, one, weirdly, I get a lot of people who are the more experienced people who do, they argue with me. They take issue with what I say and they say, okay, well, what about this? And I say, true. You can do it like that and there'll be nothing wrong with it. But you won't be solving the problem you came to me for. You can continue doing it exactly the same way. You can continue to do, hey, and here's my joke, which is completely disconnected from what I'm talking about, and you have to break character in order to do it and what have you. And it doesn't really fit in the context of what you're talking about because you're not in front of an audience that wants you to be funny. But okay, you can continue doing that. Or you can just go, this is the thing that I really want you to hear about. And they're just like, oh, I don't think people find that interesting. And it's, we have, it's not like I know everything. Let's put it that way. And I often think though that, it is the thing that people, that is the thing that they don't want to confront is the thing they really should confront. So if you're scared of technology, you should probably learn to use it better. If you're scared of you not using a script, you probably shouldn't use a script. If you're scared of using a script, you should probably listen to yourself, record yourself, and edit yourself more. There's certain things which different people bring, and they don't see, and they already almost want reassurance. They want me to tell them their own problems, then hate me for telling them. It's, but that's all right. They like me in the end when they do well.
Exactly. You mentioned your passion for history and tying into some of your podcasts earlier. Can you tell us a little bit about your podcasts?
Cool. I do quite a few. So I do a comedy one, which is called Seti Sopo, which is the word opposites backwards, which is where I discuss the opposite of things which do not have a natural opposite. So like the opposite of the Simpsons would be the Smurfs, because one is yellow, one is blue. They're both cartoons, that sort of thing. Nice little things like that. But then the opposite of a freeway would be Tara Masalata. So they don't always make sense, but it is a different. It's a funny, silly little weekly podcast I do. I do a podcast about women's fitness as well. I also do a podcast, which I've already mentioned, the Z-List Deadlist, or Z-List Deadlist, which is about obscure people from history, which is a live show that I record at the British Museum, and then I also do some interviews based around it as well. And I do a podcast for the British Museum called the British Museum Membercast, which is, you can hear, because basically the British Museum, like every institution, has a membership scheme and program, and every month or so they will put on an event where they'll get an international speaker an expert on a topic to come to the lecture theatre and give a talk. And obviously these tickets go in seconds, and they record them though, so they can't release the whole thing for legal reasons. So what I do is I take the recording, I edit it down, and I interview the person as well, so you get a really nice summary of a topic without cheating the people who turned up, but also getting a good idea of what being a member of the British Museum is like. And it's very popular, and that's going well. And also because I appear on Radio 4, which is BBC Radio 4 in the UK, on a show called Making History, which also releases podcasts. So I do quite a lot in the realm of podcasting. It's good fun.
That's awesome. And that's certainly a ton of stuff that's going to keep you plenty busy.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you don't have to listen to all of it, for goodness sake. Honestly, you don't have to listen to any. If you just download it, I just see the stats and I get all happy. But you can find all about that and my public speaker training at my website, which is izzi.com. And that is ISZ or Z, ISZI.com. So ISZI.
Izzi, that was fantastic. Thank you very much for joining us this week.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. I feel like I witted on quite a lot, but that's the trouble with public speaker trainers. We do tend to talk. Thanks for having me.
Izzi was a great guest. You can check out her website at izzi.com for more detail and to engage with Izzi through social media or find her podcasts. And that website is iszi.com. You can also find links to many of the projects we talked about in this episode over at 2minutetalktips.com/Izzi. So what are your thoughts on Izzi's comments and lessons? Let us know in the comments over at 2minutetalktips.com/Izzi. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend, colleague, or stranger. And as always, don't get best, get better. Thanks a lot. I'm Bill Monroe, and I'll talk to you next week.
Two-Minute Talk Tips is a proud production of the Currently Speaking Podcast Network.